you're watching Time of Readiness, and I'm very glad to introduce you our expert, retired U.S. Army Major General David Grange, co-founder of the charitable organization Osprey Global Solutions Ukraine. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
David Grange has 30 years of experience in the U.S. Army. He commanded the 1st Infantry Division in Germany and Task Force Eagle in Bosnia and Herzegovina. During his service, General Grange participated in several major military operations, including Vietnam, Grenada, Iraq, Bosnia and Kosovo, Middle East, and Latin America. And since the beginning of the full-scale war in 2022, you were conducting ongoing free training for military personnel in demanding and emergency medical care in accordance with NATO standards, training in the reconnaissance of mined areas. Dear Mr. General, during the more than 3 years of Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, you have seen the Ukrainian army in development. At the very beginning of the invasion, we saw many volunteers who joined the army, who didn't have enough equipment, weapons, experience. It seemed that we were not prepared at all. But very quickly, we saw how over the past 3 years, the Ukrainian military has adapted to the requirements of this modern warfare, learned to work with high-tech weapons, created its own innovative products for the military sector. How do you assess the current defense capability of the Ukrainian army? You have engaged many foreign instructors in training of our military. How effective do you think this cooperation has been and is still going on?
I believe the Ukrainian military, and by the way, I'd like to add to that the tremendous work done by the Ukrainian first responders. Since it's a full-out war, a country that cannot rely on their first responders cannot win a war. So the first responders and the military together has done an exceptional job in this war. This war, when we say modern war, it depends when in time in history you're fighting that particular engagement. So this war is very unusual, as many others were in the past, because the high-tech technology being applied to a war that's almost in many ways like World War I, with the trench warfare and the stalemates and very long defensive lines between the two sides. And the technology obviously has made a difference in many examples during this war. And I think the world's watching this very carefully because of the Russia itself, which is a very powerful nation, China, other countries, the United States, because of the development and the progress back and forth on this particular fight. So I have learned a lot myself, though I've been in the background doing humanitarian work, mostly like you had mentioned, the medical stuff. The medical, by the way, is very important because without the medical support, you have no soldier morale. You can't take care of people and put them back into the fight if you don't have a good medical program, a good structure. And that has been a difficulty for Ukraine, but they've done an exceptional job in the fight and also taking care of the troops considering the circumstances.
And in your opinion, how interesting will this experience of our Ukrainian military be for NATO countries? First of all, armed forces of Ukraine now have the most up-to-date knowledge of warfare in modern conditions in Europe, with the use of these high-tech weapons and all new experiences. Secondly, the Ukrainian army has created something that has never been seen before in this form in NATO army. Not everything is based on hierarchical common structures from top to the bottom. Soldiers and unit commanders on the ground have to make many situational decisions, find new approaches. So it's a kind of decentralization of the classical army system, if I can say like this. But thanks to it, people from different fields, from professions, were able to become part of this armed forces of Ukraine and to contribute their civilian experience to the defense of the state. This is uniqueness of our army. How do you feel about this as a person who has served in the highly structured American army?
Well, the American army is highly structured, but it's also decentralized because we have a non-commissioned officer corps, the sergeants, and Ukraine's working on that. And Ukraine has a lot of decentralized work in regards to how to do this fight. That I would highly applaud. But at the same time, you still have some residual Soviet military mindset where you have officers at higher ranks making decisions that sergeants or lieutenants or captains or battalion commanders should do on the battlefield. Now, that aside, once that old structure, that culture is changed, it'll be an unbelievable fighting machine. So even with that Soviet constraint from the old days, the Ukrainian military is doing a fantastic job. Any military in any type of war must be able to handle heavy forces, light forces, and special operation forces with the synergy that creates, and put them at the right place at the right time in the right conditions. It's the same with being able to integrate air, land, and sea. If you cannot do that, you cannot win. You cannot defend your country. So just a few recent examples, Ukraine has done an extraordinary job at this. So for instance, I would say that the Black Sea is not owned by any one country anymore. With the great work that SOF has done, Special Operations has done in the water. On the land, you can say 800 kilometers of front lines or more, to be able to defend that with very few troops, plug the holes when there's breakthroughs and adjust the lines depending on the fight, using that equipment properly with this high tech in the air, with the drones, with the artillery, with the minefields, a tremendous job. And then most recently, air. Not only the deep attack with the drones in Russian territory, but also the recent air assault operation, using SOF to go deep, attack from the rear, and actually disrupt planned enemy attacks. So it's more important even with a weaker country fighting a stronger country. Air, land, and sea in synchronization, and using heavy, light, special operation forces in synchronization. And Ukraine has done that so far very well, and is a leader in certain parts of warfare, like drone warfare, as an example. So I'll stop there, but that's just my feel of what I've had the opportunity to see, and I respect very well.
Ukraine now has almost run out of people who are voluntarily joining the army. How do you assess the problems with mobilization in Ukraine? And do your NATO standard trainings with international instructors motivate potential fighters become the part of the Ukrainian army? Because they kind of guarantee of good training is guaranteeing also human resource security, right?
Yeah, so it's all about people. It's all about the soldier. And without manpower, you have to rely on other unique ways to handle the enemy. But it's all about how you mobilize and the readiness, the training and readiness of those people you mobilized. Now, I think it's important to say, if I may, that it's not just NATO. We use NATO as a comparison quite often, but it's actually countries around the world. They all have the same, militaries have the same challenge, not just NATO. These are hard choices to make by the leadership of Ukraine. The mobilization, what age group, what's their backgrounds. And there's a lot of political fighting back and forth about mobilization. But without people, you cannot hold the line. And maybe more importantly, when you're on the line, you don't want to keep one group of soldiers in a certain spot on the line forever. You have to rotate people back for rest, rotate people back for families, rotate people back to get retrained. It's hard to just stay in one place for such a long period of time, especially in these tough winters, living in a wet, cold trench. That's tough on morale. So the mobilization is an important thing. And what's at stake? The lives of the nation and the nation's existence itself. So if mobilization must be done, it must be done. And that has to be something that Ukraine has to tighten their belt and do if they're going to survive. So I do believe in mobilization. In fact, I was in charge of that for our Army back years and years ago. It's not easy. It's tough, but it has to be done to survive.
And what trainings is your organization doing at the moment?
Well, we're going to continue to support Ukraine as best we can. And it's not easy because a lot of support's wavering. Not just from the United States, but other places. So where we can help on a nonprofit sector. We'll continue to do that to the best of our ability. I like the medical because I have been wounded myself several times. And I was always in a very good position because I had a very powerful medical system in my Army behind me. And when you have something like that behind you, your morale is tough. There's trust involved. You trust the people that are going to take care of you. So training has to be adapted. You have certain standards, NATO standards, European Union standards, whatever the case may be. But if it's not adapted to the current fight, then it doesn't work. If you can't train people to take care of people in a trench bleeding out and the very difficulty evacuating the wounded and taking care of them at the next level of care, and they die or they're crippled for life, that word gets out. So it's important to have this training. What works? Remember, all technology also in medical. If the technology does not fit the current tactics and techniques for that fight, it doesn't matter how great the technology is. Technology must fit with tactics. And the commanders are the ones that know how to put it together to make it work to the best advantage to defeat the enemy and keep their soldiers alive.
We see also in the US a very long culture of treating the veterans of war, working with veterans and different psychology problems, helping them come back to normal social life. In Ukraine, this topic is just starting, but we see already so many injured people, people with post-traumatic syndrome. What do you think would be now necessary in Ukraine in first case, and is your organization also helping the veterans?
Yes, we are. And there's a couple things here that has to be at top of mind. When a soldier, let's say, is wounded and goes back to his family, if the family's still in Ukraine, or goes back to their community, their village, in their oblast, if they're not taken care of, the word gets out. Others don't want to serve. They say, wait a minute, I lost a leg, I lost an eye, I have mental problems, I can't sleep at night, whatever the problem may be, I can't talk with my children properly, my children have problems. If that can't be worked on immediately, it affects the future of the fight. Now, I'm very lucky because in the United States, we have a very good veterans program. It's not perfect, but it's probably the best in the world. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal not only for the soldier, but also for the family of the soldier. So yes, we have several programs. One's called Healing Hearts. We have had a very difficult time through our own bureaucracy, where the United States departments are in Ukraine helping in certain areas, to not change from the past. Well, we always did it this way in another country, or this or that. And also Ukraine, your country. The bureaucracy sometimes keeps these good programs from happening. So look, mobilization, training, taking care of soldiers, that whole requirement has to be done. You just can't do one of them. And so, yes, we are working on that. I feel very good about the programs I've seen. I have seen very closely PTSD and mental issues on soldiers, my own. Maybe I have some myself, who knows? But it's important to understand that there must be trust. Now, the underlying factor, and all we've talked about so far, that doesn't change. I don't care about, in this case, the technology that's developed, whatever. What does not ever change in war is leadership. Without good, tough, caring leadership, you cannot win. My father was in the military for 42 years. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. We were in Vietnam together. And he always taught me to be tough, but be compassionate. I'm convinced totally from my combat experience myself, that is the glue that holds everything together, leadership. So if the technology that is exceptional in Ukraine, the will to win is exceptional in Ukraine. But leadership is the key.
Do you mean also the leadership on the level of commanders of battalions or
I mean, from your
brigades?
president all the way down to your officers and sergeants in the trench. Yes, everybody. Leadership training, leadership expectations, requirements is the most important thing you can possibly have.
Are you also providing leadership trainings?
Are we? Indirectly.
Indirectly.
It's in other words, it's hard to say if you're training soldiers on a medical program and they ask, how would you do that? How would you put your team together? Let me give you an example in Ukraine. Sometimes you need doctors bad, just like you need medics. And if a doctor maybe gets pulled out of a civilian hospital and he's a pediatrician, and all of a sudden he's outside of Kharkiv or Kherson or Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, wherever the case may be, and he's in a surgical support team. He's in a forward surgical team, and all of a sudden he's a trauma surgeon because he's the doctor, and everybody looks at him. He has to do something. So the on-the-job training in Ukraine is exceptional by necessity. Maybe what should happen, you should have more training, obviously, before you go, but you don't have a choice many times. And I have seen those doctors provide leadership to their medical team that's extraordinary. And those that are very good leaders, naturally, or just because they're rallied to serve and their determination, they're very good leaders in their stabilization points or forward surgical teams, whatever the case may be, or even in a training segment, that maybe we do. You see how the leaders pop out of the group. So yeah, I think even the medical side, leadership is key. Leadership is about duty to others, not just yourself. So even in Kiev, in the ministries, you have to have good leadership. Just like in the departments in Washington, in D.C., you have to have good leadership. Without that, there's nothing.
Sure. In the military, there is always a discussion that the commanders who are coming from Soviet school, yes, who are older generation, they just don't suit to the modern conditions of this leadership and rules of modern warfare. And the young people who get this leadership don't have enough experience. What do you think is better, to have young people overtaking this role or still to relearn the older school?
Yeah, it's hard to just say young and old. I'm an old guy, so maybe I'm a little prejudiced. I don't know. But I think that it's important to understand that, well, first of all, not all of your older leaders still have some of the Soviet mindset. Some of them have adapted very well. So I want to make sure you understand that I'm not saying that's everyone. That's not true.
Yeah.
And the younger ones, they're very good at the technology, but they don't know how to live in some of the tough conditions that are expected of soldiers in this kind of war, in your climate, in your terrain, against your particular enemy. So it's a combination. That's why I think it's important, and we do it in our military, to continue to train even the senior officers. We have war colleges, and you have this too, the college system, training system for the senior officers. And we have an exceptional program for our young officers and young sergeants. That the lower training is very important. Because then you develop someone. Most I learned in my life was a lieutenant in Vietnam. There's some bad things, but I knew never to do that again if I was in another war. And I never forgot those things. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm prejudiced because I was not brought up under a Soviet-type military structure. I was brought up in the American structure, which came from Germans, the British, the French. And it's very good because of how they do the leadership, I believe. And I've seen very junior people make tough decisions on their own that in some of the Soviet style, they have to use colonels or generals do. That's not necessary. They should be focused on strategy. They should be focused on major military formations, movement, not small platoon actions. That's done by young people. And so anyway, the Ukraine's changing, it's adapting, but I've been in a lot of Eastern European countries and it's the same in many places. It's not just Ukraine.
But then what is your main motivation as an American to be in Ukraine during all these hard years of full-scale invasion?
That's a great question. I've been asked that by my wife and other people as well. Yeah. So I guess it's in my blood. And when I say it's in my blood, the duty to keep serving. I mean, I have some skills. My people have skills that we can share. And there's a motto of American Special Forces called Oppresso Libere, which means free the oppressed. And that's stayed with me for a long time. And I really believe in that motto. So that's why we're in Ukraine, serving in the military, though I've been retired for 20 years. Is it, like I said, is in my blood. I can't help myself. It's a legacy of the family. The father, grandfather, great-grandfather, brothers, sisters, sons, wife, many people, military, very big service family, right? So we have to, it's just a way of life. And I want to help. Now, am I against everything the United States of America is doing before and right now, let's say, in the different administrations? No, I'm not. How you implement that, maybe I'd do it a little different. But there's a lot of responsibility that the United States has at the higher level. We have a lot of problems in the Pacific. We have a lot of threats from rogue nations like North Korea and Iran. You have terrorist organizations and gangs, even gangs that have using the same kind of weaponry that you're using right now in Ukraine and with the Russians. They have access to it. So there's a lot of responsibility, and we're spread very thin globally, very thin globally. So I understand that. And so I think the private sector, for-profit and non-profit, has to help in these wars, not just the government, in order to save lives and to win the fight.
Our channel and Alliance for Human Resource Readiness is trying to speak abroad more about the readiness of the civil society to explain to the European people now how important is the readiness for the challenges of war, which can become also a problem for Europe. And people in Europe, in my opinion, don't really take seriously now the necessity to enlarge our weapons production, to be prepared for the possible threat coming from Russia. What is the perception of this war in the United States among the civil people? And do you think that we should do more from the Ukrainian side to talk in Europe, in America about this war, to explain more what's going on and how it can influence the people also in other countries?
Sure. So, yeah, the dialogue between the private sector is very important. Many people in the United States don't understand the war in Ukraine. They don't even know where Ukraine is located. Just like many Europeans, even though that's their region, a lot of them don't care. But there's a lot that do care. Don't get me wrong. There's been a lot of Americans that do care. I get asked questions all the time about Ukraine. And if you can take the time to sit down and discuss Ukraine with them, they begin to understand. They begin to understand. And Ukraine's an ally of the United States of America. So we have to help at some level. The argument's what level, right? The argument's at what level. And some things in Ukraine have caused problems, like corruption. And you know this well. And I have to admit, every place I've been in warfare or work programs, there's corruption. And there's corruptions in international organizations that help people. I've seen it everywhere. What happens when that kind of stuff happens, it affects their fellow citizens. It's not right. That's why I was mentioning about leadership before. That's why I mentioned that.
Yeah. Because
good leaders are not corrupt. And by the way, we've had our own problems with that in the United States as well as every country in the world. But back to your point is that yes, it has to be dialogue going back and forth. Ukraine is in a very strategic location geographically, just like the Baltic states and some other countries. And And so peace deal should happen. I know it's going back and forth, and people aren't agreeing. I try to put myself in the leadership position in my mind that your country has, and it's tough. It's not easy. It's really a tough position to be in. But you know, if you're put in that position, you have to perform, figure out how to do it. So yeah, I think that a lot of Americans are going to continue to support, but a lot of Americans don't understand Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Major General. It was my pleasure and my honor, and thank you also from all Ukrainians for the all great job you're doing for our country.
Well, thank you. And some of the organizations on readiness, for instance, in Ukraine, are very important right now to prepare for the future of Ukraine. So while you're doing the current battle, it's very important to understand the transition to what happens next. And what happens next is very, very hard to do, just like Bosnia-Herzegovina, where I spent time. And then time not only in uniform as a commander, but time as a civilian helping the people in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo. So that's a very tough, once those lines are drawn on the map, it's a very tough thing to enforce and to keep the peace. Very difficult mission. So my hat's off to the people of Ukraine, and I'm proud to serve with you where I can. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.